I'm going to explore affordances and language learning from an ecological perspective. Most of my professional experience is with adult learners, and it often happens that they prefer not to use English outside the classroom. They've told me it's hard to switch from Spanish to English when they're caught, especially when they're caught off guard. They've said they have to prepare themselves in advance to use English. Therefore, they would rather stick to their mother tongue until they feel fully capable of using the target language more effectively. However, uh, however, I understand the interaction is widely recognized as a language learning trigger. I often wonder what are the benefits from using English outside the classroom and also what the outcomes of their avoidance are. For almost 3 years, I have worked in an Australian-owned mining company in northern Chile. I teach ESP to a group of workers, most of them engineers and geologists, for 2 hours a week. Their level of proficiency varies from beginners to upper intermediate, and they're divided into different groups accordingly. The main objective for them is to learn English. The main objective for them to learn English is to be able to communicate with the overseas colleagues by face-to-face interaction, video conferences, and so on. There are plenty of opportunities to interact with native speakers and get involved in English-mediated communication exchanges. Furthermore, they've got a great deal of knowledge of technical vocabulary. As in the company, many procedures, manuals, and concepts are used in English on a daily basis. It gets challenging trying to explain what an affordance is, as it's not referred to something that happens in isolation, but instead it's what happens when a specific agent gets involved in a particular situation in a specific time and space. The word affordance was coined by the psychologist James Gibson in 1979 to refer to a reciprocal relationship between an organism and a particular feature of its environment. An affordance affords further action, but does not cause or trigger it. What becomes an affordance depends on what the organism does, what it wants, and what is useful for it. When it comes to learning, Van Leer stated that if the language learner is active and engaged, she'll perceive linguistic affordances and use them for linguistic action. To go over a few concepts related to affordance. An agent is an organism actively engaged. Effectivity is the agent's particular abilities to act. The goal is the objective of the interaction. Environment is the particular situation in which the interaction takes place. And perception is obtaining information from the active relation between the organism and a structured environment. So, so how do we perceive an affordance? Gibson's theory is that human activity is driven forward by cycles of perception and action, with action giving rise to the perception of additional affordances for action. Say, if I'm walking in my grandparents' farm and I'm actively engaged, and I come across a tree, an apple tree, I think, I could eat an apple. At that moment, I'm perceiving an affordance. However, it wouldn't be the same for, say, a butterfly, because there is no possible way a butterfly is able to eat an apple. So no affordance is perceived. The butterfly may be hungry. The apple may be food. But there's no affordance there, as there's no effectivity. The butterfly does not possess the ability to digest an apple. An affordance is a property of neither the actor nor of an object. It is a relationship between the two. So the same tree, but this time there's a squirrel with different effectivities and different goals. The squirrel, would probably perceive the affordance of climbing the tree, so it's climbable for the squirrel. But if there's another human being, a lumberjack this time, he would probably perceive the affordance of cutting down the tree. Again, the effectivities and the goals have changed. Although information specifying an affordance might potentially be available, along with a nearly infinite amount of other information, only agents with particular intentions and particular effectivities would be expected to pick up or detect such information on a given occasion. What happens with language learning? From an ecological psychology perspective, each learner environment interaction can be seen as a result of an intentionally driven agent perceiving and acting on environmental affordances as they move toward their currently adapted goal. This is also called intentional dynamics in ecological terms. A language learner would have to adjust her goals towards perceiving language learning affordances, and as the learner adjusts her knowledge by keep picking up affordances, the perception action cycle activates, leading to perceptual attunement, which is a recursive process in which the affordances would be redefined with the emergence of newly tuned perceptual system, in other words, learning. The learner is immersed in an environment full of potential meanings. These meanings become available gradually as the learner interacts within and with this environment. Language, language development is ecological and semiotic in the sense that it is perceptual, contextual, and social. It relates the emergence of language both social relationship and to the developing skills of movement around objects and into different physical and social spaces and to gestures. Gestures, pictures, and objects all blend with language in the communicative context, and even first language use can be seen as a semiotic system that supports emerging second language use. When learners become aware of the linguistic affordances, they are able to perceive them and therefore make better use of the learning opportunities. More precisely, in my context, if learners took the chance to use English with those speakers who have a higher level of proficiency or those native speakers, they would have a better chance to pick up linguistic affordances. In order to make these interactions of learners with colleagues in informal settings meaningful as a language learning experience, learners must be focused on perceiving learning opportunities. It is important to notice that the learner's goals will determine the extent to which the affordances that the teacher plans will be the same as the affordances detected by the learner. As learners get more engaged, they perceive more affordances. As they perceive more affordances, they restructure their knowledge of the language, and as they restructure their knowledge, more affordances are perceived. They might have been there before, but only at this point they can perceive them due to the prior restructuring. It's a never-ending process. By avoiding using English outside the classroom, they're keeping themselves from all these learning opportunities and, as a consequence, slowing down the learning process. By becoming aware of what affordances are, we are able as teachers to help learners to perceive the affordances available by making them aware of their existence in the environment. I believe the more aware you are as a learner, the more possibilities to take advantage of learning opportunities available around us. Maybe some further research could deal with the type of task that could be more beneficial for learners in terms of picking up affordances. Van Leer suggests that setting up tasks to promote dynamic interaction rather than pair work is an avenue worth exploring. Thank you.